So we're still working on lesson 1. This time we're going to discuss some issues on human development. Now, as teacher, we should be aware on the issues as regards to human development. Now we have these issues, nature versus, this has to be nurture, okay? Nature versus nurture, continuity versus discontinuity. We also have stability versus change. So all of these are the coverage of what we're going to discuss today until the next meeting if we cannot finish all these issues. Now, we have, when we say nature versus nurture, now the nature versus nurture involves the extent, guys, to which particular aspects of behavior are a product of either inherited, and that's nature. So, for example, is that genetic or acquired, which is, for example, is that learned influences. So, when we say nature, this is nature is what we think of as pre-wiring, and this is usually influenced by genetic inheritance and of course other biological factors. Now when we say nurture, this is generally taken as the influence of external factors after conception. Okay, so for example, the product of exposure, life experiences, and learning on an individual as individual. Now, behavioral genetics, guys, has enabled psychology to quantify the relative contribution of nature and nurture with regard to specific psychological traits. Instead of defending extreme nativist or nurturist views, for instance, most psychological researchers, guys, are now interested in investigating how nature and nurture interact in a host of qualitatively different ways. For example, we have epigenetics, which is an emerging area of research which shows how environmental influences affect the expression of genes. When trying to explain development, it's necessary to consider the relative contribution of both nature and nurture. Developmental psychology seeks to answer two big questions about heredity and environment. First is, how much weight does each contribute? Then another one is, how do nature and nurture interact? Okay. So as you see here, from nature, we have some philosophers who are advocates of nature. We begin with Plato. So his ideas such as the good and beauty are inborn, meaning it's innate, no? That an individual or a child has its good and beauty which are inborn. Now, we also have another one, Descartes. He also has his ideas about being innate. And then there's another one, Charles Darwin. Some traits become part of our nature through natural selection. They help us survive long enough to pass the traits to the next generation. So for nurture, we have Aristotle, all knowledge comes through the senses. Okay. So if we have time, we'll go back to their ideas, no? And then nurture under John Locke, the mind is a blank slate. So for example, blank chalkboard or screen written on by experience. So meaning, as we grow older, that blank is being filled or filled by experiences. And that is one reason why John Locke becomes an advocate of nurture. Oh, wait, I guess I forgot one. So going back with nature and nurture, nature again refers to the process of biological maturation, inheritance, and maturation, inheritance, and maturation. So one of the reasons why the development of human beings is so similar or same, it's because of our common uh, species or our hereditary, and this is guided by all of us through many of the same developmental changes at about same points in our lives. So nurture refers to the impact of the environment, which involves the process of learning through experiences. So the key word for nature is this is about genetic, and then nurture, this is more of experiences, no, or exposure. And we have two effective ways on how we study nature nurture. So if we're going to consider twin studies, for example, identical twins have the same genotype, and fraternal twins have an average of 50% of their genes in common. Now, there's this adoption studies, guys, that similarities with the biological family support nature. Okay. While similarities with the adoptive family support nurture. Okay. Now, if we go back with Skinner, Skinner believed in influences from nurture. He felt that parents played a big role in a child's behavior development. So as what I've discussed, or as what you have watched in the lecture video, he also felt that each child had different motivations for their actions, and they had to learn what the consequences of their actions were. Another is Vygotsky. So he believed in influences from nurture. He felt that the community played a big role in the development of a child. He also felt that children best learn by interaction with other. So I'd like to cite some ideas and philosophies involving nature and nurture. We have one, nativism. So this is also known as extreme nature position. So it's been long known that physical or certain physical characteristics are biologically determined by genetic inheritance. The color of the eyes, straight or curly hair, pigmentation of the skin, and certain diseases, these are all function of the genes we inherit. So these facts or ideas, guys, have led many to speculate as to whether psychological characteristics such as behavioral tendencies, personality attributes, and mental abilities are also wired in before we are born. So if you remember, for example, about your personality attributes, no? So sometimes you might be hearing these lines from your parents, no? Manang-mana ka talaga sa pinagmanahan mo, no? So that only implies that uh, yung attitude mo was inherited from your parents. For example, um, being impatient um, can be associated with your parents, which was inherited by you, no? So parang yun yung idea niya. Now, those who adopt an extreme hereditary position are known as nativists, no? So everything which is credited to being innate has something to do with being nativist. So their basic assumption is that the characteristics of the human species as a whole are product of evolution, and that individual differences are due to each person's unique genetic code. So something to do with hereditary, something to do with genes again. So this is more of nature. So for example, an extreme nature positions in psychology include the studies of Chomsky in 1965, who proposed language is gained through the use of an innate language or innate language acquisition device. So one example is Freud's theory of aggression as being an innate drive. And then this is also known as thanatos. Now, guys, characteristics and differences that are not observable at birth, which emerge later in life, are regarded as the product of maturation. And we can say all we have the inner biological clock, which switches on or off types of behavior in a pre-programmed way. Another, guys, is this time we have empiricism. Empiricism. Okay, so this is extreme nurture position, no? As opposite to nativism, no? At the other end of the spectrum are the environmentalists, also known as imperialists. So their basic assumption is that at birth, the human mind is a tabula rasa or a blank slate, and that this is gradually filled as a result of experiences. So that is in contrast to nativist approach. So from this view, psychological characteristics, guys, and behavioral differences that emerge through infancy and childhood are results of learning. So it is how you are brought up, so that's nurture, that governs the psychologically significant aspects of lives, of child's development, and the concept of maturation applies only to the biological. For example, if you remember Bandura's social learning theory, so this states that aggression is learned from so if you recall the Bobodal, no? So this is an example also of uh being example also of nurture, no? The extreme nurture position. Another, guys, is Skinner. So he believed that language is learned from another people via behavior shaping techniques. We have also Freud, who stated that events in our childhood have a great influence on our adult lives. So later we'll be discussing Erikson's stages of life, no? Another is the behavioral genetics. Now, guys, researchers in the field of behavioral genetics study variation in behavior as it is affected by genes, which are the units of heredity passed down from parents to offspring. So meaning the behavior is being inherited by the children to their parents, no? So this is more of hereditary, not acquired. So we now know that DNA differences are the major systematic source of psychological differences between us. So environmental effects are important, but what we have learned in recent years is that they are mostly random. That's according to Plomin. Now, behavioral genetics has enabled psychology to quantify the relative contribution of nature and nurture with regard to specific psychological traits. And one way to do this is to study relatives who share the same genes, that's considered nature, but a different environment, which is we consider nurture. So adoption acts as a natural experiment which allows researchers to do this. Now, empirical studies have consistently shown, guys, that adoptive children show greater resemblance to their biological parents rather than their adoptive or environmental parents. Okay. Now, another way of studying heredity is by comparing the behavior of twins who can either be identical or sharing the same genes or non-identical, which would be sharing 50% of genes. So like adoption studies, twin studies support the first rule of behavior genetics that psychological traits are extremely heritable, about 50% on average. We also have nurture, guys, assumes that correlations between environmental factors and psychological outcomes are caused by or are caused environmentally. For example, how much parents read with their children and how well children learn to read appear to be related. Other examples include environmental stress and its effect on depression. So meaning everything is acquired. Everything is learned by experience. But behavioral genetics argues that what look like environmental effects are to a large extent really a reflection of genetic differences, no? So that's the contradiction naman according to Plomin. Now people select, modify, and create environments correlated with their genetic disposition. So this means that what sometimes appear to be an environmental influence, which is nurture, is a genetic influence, which is nature. Thus, guys, children that are genetically predisposed to be competent readers will be happy to listen to their parents and read them stories and to be more likely to encourage this interaction. Okay. Give some of your qualities. Continuity and discontinuity. So when we say continuity, there's a gradual and increasing changes happening. And this is supported by Skinner's operant conditioning. Okay. And then discontinuity, the change is distinct changes happening. And then it's supported by Erikson's psychosocial theory of human development. I guess we're done with Skinner's operant. So we'll just pass through this and we'll concentrate with Erikson's psychosocial theory of human development. Now, think about how children become adults. Is there a predictable pattern they follow regarding thought and language and social development? Do children go through gradual changes or are they abrupt changes? And that's about continuity and discontinuity. Now, normative development, guys, is typically viewed as a continual and cumulative process, no? So the other term for that is normative. So If it's like about continuity, this is more of normative development. The continuity view says that change is gradual. Children become more skillful in thinking, talking, or acting much the same way as they get taller, no? So that's given, no? Habang lumalaki, uh, they learn, they think more critically, they talk uh much, no? So that's the essence of, or that's the idea of continuity. Now, the discontinuity view sees development as more abrupt. Now, a succession of changes that produce different behaviors in different age specific life periods called stages. So they believe in stages, no? That's why I told you we will be working on Erikson's psychosocial theory of human development. No, biological changes provide the potential for these changes. We always hear people talking about children going through stages in life. For example, sensory motor stage. And these are called developmental stages, periods of life initiated by distinct transactions in physical or psychological functioning. So that's about discontinuity. Now, guys, psychologists of the discontinuity view believe that people go through the same stages in the same order, but not necessarily at the same rate. Skinner's theory is continuous. Okay? So he didn't believe there was stages for behavior development. He felt that a child's motivation influenced their behavior and their motivation is different and changes as a child develops. Moreover, with regard to Vygotsky's theory and concepts are both continuous at the same time discontinuous. So they're continuous in the sense that a child's cognitive development is affected by their surroundings and society. They're discontinuous in the sense that a child goes through school and develops certain skills while they are at a certain grade level. So it's both continuous and discontinuous for Vygotsky's theory. Okay? Oh, wait. So this is Skinner's operant conditioning, and Skinner is believes in the idea of continuity. No, so you remember about the reinforcement and the punishment. Positive applies stimulus, negative remove stimulus. About this one. Now, I'd like to concentrate with Erikson's 8 stages of psychosocial development. Okay. We have first trust versus mistrust. And this is happening from 0 month to 18 months old. So um individuals who experience this issue are infants. Okay. Now, the trust versus mistrust stage obviously is the first stage of psychologist Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. Now, this stage, guys, begins at birth and lasts until your child or until the child is around 8 months old. According to Erikson, it is most important period of child's life as it shapes their view of the world as well as their overall personality. Now, the psychosocial conflict in this stage is trust versus mistrust. Then the major question that an infant could ask is, can I trust the people around me? And the infant is developing hope as he surpass this stage, this first stage of psychosocial development. And one important event in this stage is feeding. Okay. Now, babies are almost entirely dependent on their caregivers, on their parents. So it should come as no surprise that how parents interact with their babies has a deep or profound effect on both their physical and mental health. Now, Erikson believed, guys, that early pattern of trust help children build a strong base of trust that's crucial for their social and emotional development. If a child successfully develops trust, they will feel safe and secure in the world. Now, as parents, for example, they're essentially shaping their personality and determining how they will view the world. Now, children who learn to trust caregivers in infancy will be more likely to form trusting relationships with others throughout the course of their lives. Now, the first stage is important, no? So, imagine these stages of psychosocial development is important for us to, understand our learners. So, that's why this is we have to necessarily discuss each stage. We go with toddler, and this is about autonomy versus shame and doubt. But going back to infant, no? So the question here is, how do we build trust? Now, the primary way we can build trust with an infant is to respond when they try to communicate with you, no? Because babies can't use words to express themselves, so they use nonverbal strategies to communicate. So what they're thinking and feeling at all times. So usually they cry. So crying is one of the most common strategies babies use to communicate with their caregivers, and it carries different meanings. So usually babies cry to let you know that they need one of the following, no? One is affection. So Erikson believes that an infant cries communicated an important message to caregivers. So such cries indicate an unmet need, and it is up to caregivers to determine how to fulfill that need. Comfort. So it's important for caregivers to provide comfort to an infant by holding them closely and securely. So this provides both warm and physical contact. So feeding, bathing, and comforting child's health help them to learn to trust that their needs will be met. Of course, food, no? Now, Erikson also believed that feeding played a pivotal role in the development of trust. So by feeding an infant when the child's hungry, of course, they learn that they can trust their need for nourishment will be met. Okay, so how about consequences of mistrust? Children raised by consistently unreliable, unpredictable parents who fail to meet these basic needs eventually develop an overall sense of mistrust. So mistrust can cause children to become fearful, confused, and anxious. So all of which make it difficult to form healthy relationships. So in turn, this can lead to poor social support, isolation, and loneliness. Okay.